Open the podcast doors, Hal.
It's Kubrick's Universe, the Stanley Kubrick Podcast.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Jason Furlong, and Stephen Rigg is manning the boards. Today's guest is John Bates. He has worked in various jobs at Brunel University over the last 50 years or so. To Kubrick fans, Brunel University has a special resonance. It was, of course, the location of the Ludovico Medical Facility, where Malcolm McDowell, playing Alex, had his treatment. There were, in fact, 4 areas at the university used by Kubrick. Alex's apartment ground floor lobby, where he comes home to his flat block, the Ludovico facility check-in, Alex's bedroom at the Ludovico facility, and the now iconic Ludovico Therapy Screening Room, where we see Alex bound to a chair, wearing lid locks, and forced to watch violence on the big screen. Vidi not so well. So John Bates, as a 16-year-old itinerant school leaver at his first job at Brunel, was witness to Stanley Kubrick and his team filming A Clockwork Orange, and was even employed to work with Kubrick's crew. Our producer, Stephen Rigg, spoke to John Bates on the 17th of January, 2023. Over to you, Stephen.
So hello, John. Thanks for joining us today. Could you start by telling us about your childhood in the 60s, particularly during the school holidays when you would visit Thames TV at Teddington and Pinewood Studios with your dad?
Yes, my dad used to work for a company called Grundens, and they were basically a sand and ballast delivery service. And what would happen is you'd get something like Pinewood Studios say we need 20 tons of sand for a beach scene or something. And every now and again, my dad's company got the contract to supply the sand. Occasionally, it would be taking rubbish away from the back lot. So where parts of scenery that was no longer needed, they needed to clear some space, we would end up sort of taking rubbish away. But with Pinewood Studios, that was probably the place I visited most. Thames Television Studios at Teddington, I probably only visited about 3 times, I think. But even so, that was quite interesting because that was an all-day job. Because it was a very small site, there wasn't much room to actually get like a mechanical digger that could load the lorry. It had to be loaded by hand, which usually took sort of like 5 or 6 hours. But we were looked after while we were there. We were given vouchers to go to the canteen to get something to eat. And the people that at the studio, they would do all the loading. All my dad had to do was just drive it away at the end of the day. But I did get to go in to see some of the films, some productions, Magpie for a start, sort of sneaking into a studio, sort of just watching that being made.
Magpie, the TV show?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
There was a lot of good stuff. Well, a lot of good stuff. A lot of stuff I used to watch and enjoy in the 80s, because I was born in 70. Came from Thames TV. I think they did things like Benny Hill and Kenny Everett and things like that. That were the kind of stuff I watched. And I think they came out to Thames TV.
They did indeed. I do remember that actually seeing some of the actors that used to be on some of the Benny Hill shows.
Oh, yeah.
I think there was one there. I think her name was Rita Webb. She was quite a fat lady, but she was always in comedies and things like that.
So back in 1970, I believe that's the year you left school and you got your first job, which happened to be at Brunel, and you witnessed the filming of A Clockwork Orange. So tell us about leaving school and getting the job and coming across Kubrick's film while you were there.
Yeah. Right. Well, when I first was planning to leave school, my initial sort of plans were to be in something photographic, sort of actually photography. I did all the usual things, so I applied to the local paper to see if anybody had a trainee sort of scheme going for photography, for a photographer. I applied to the Metropolitan Police to see if they had something going, like a trainee scheme for a photographer.
Yeah.
Be a scenic crimes photographer. And again, there was no joy there. The BBC I applied to, but there was nothing sort of going on there. By this time, my sort of careers teacher was getting a bit concerned about didn't seem to be making any progress to finding a job in the way of photography. I do remember she made one suggestion, which really, to me, was not what I wanted to do. She suggested I get a job at Dixon's. They sell cameras, she said.
Yes, I can see the connection, no.
No, that was not what I wanted to do. No. I politely gave a reply to this. I'll think about it, but that was it.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I wanted to do. But anyway, bottom line of it was, I left school. We made plans to go on holiday for 2 weeks as a family down to Cornwall. Prior to that, the year before, my dad had bought not a new car, but another car, and was looking to get rid of his old car. And one of our neighbours decided he would like to buy it, so he bought it off of us. But he worked at Brunel University, and he was a maintenance man in the maintenance department. He was a plumber by trade, and he was, he knew about me leaving school, and I'd spoken to him often when I passed his house and that. But anyway, when we came back from holiday, he had seen a job advertised at Brunel for a junior audio-visual technician. And he knew I was interested in photography, but he wasn't sure whether that's what I would really want to do, whether it was, what I should be going for. But he had spoken to the departments that dealt with applicants and said, look, there's somebody coming back from holiday this weekend, and I think they might want to apply for this, but you've got the closing date is Friday. Would you take their application if they got it to you on Monday? Anyway, so as soon as I got back on the Saturday, first thing I knew was him knocking on the door saying, I've got this advert here. There's a job going at Brunel. I'm not sure if it's what you want to do or whether you want to think about it. And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go for that. Anyway, bottom line of it was I went for an interview a couple of weeks later, and I got the job at Brunel University, starting in the July of that year of 1970.
Wow.
And that was the start of it. Thanks to Les, that was the neighbour, a very nice man, and that. And he didn't have to do that, but he obviously knew I was interested in photography and other types of media type things, and that's what happens. So that was nice of him. I thought very kind of him to actually approach the department to say, look, somebody might want to apply for this. Would you accept the application if they get it to you Monday?
Right. And was it a perfect job for you when you got settled in and saw what it was all about?
It was, yes, because it gave me a variety of things that I learnt. Photography would have been one thing, but this involved dealing with films, photography indirectly, sort of sound reinforcement for presentations and for conferences, reprographics, which is in the days of when people still used overhead projectors to project transparencies to classes, slide projectors and things like that. And I started work there. I was the third member of the team. There was the chief technician, the senior technician, and I was the junior. And like I say, I think, the junior was the gopher.
Yeah, of course.
Go and get a packet of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Go and empty the ashtray. Go and do this. Yeah, I think you had to start from the bottom. You learnt that. I think most jobs back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got the job there, and it was. I sort of started to learn the craft, the skills of what I was supposed to be doing, how to operate projectors, and how to project slides the right way around, not have them upside down, things like that. And we had a memo come through from one of the administration offices to say there'd be a film crew coming to Brunel University, a company called Hawk Films Limited, and they would be on campus from the 10th of September to the 20th of September. And in the memo, it just gave very brief details of the locations they would be filming in, the days they would be setting up, and the days they would hope to be filming, though they did say that this may be subject to change. And that was the first I knew about a film company coming to Brunel. But having said that, I did know about another film that had been shot at Brunel, because back in 1968, my mother was working at Brunel as a cleaner in one of the halls of residences. And she, one of the halls, the residence they used as dressing room and restrooms for the actors was the block that my mum worked in. And that had Peter Cook, Arthur Lowe, and people like that.
And the film was called. The film was called
The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer.
Yes.
And it was in fact David Frost's very first film that he produced with his new company, Paradigm Films, I think.
Okay. And I think John Cleese was in that scene shot at Brunel. So your mum might have bumped into John Cleese and Graham Chapman from the Parthens.
That's right. Yes, as I say, she took it on herself, bless her soul, to get loads of autographs. But again, it's one of those things when you are a child, when you are young, you don't always take things in, you don't always appreciate it. And when I came home, on the mantelpiece was the scribbled, autographs by Peter Cook and John Cleese and Arthur Lowe and that. And so I got these because these people are in my block. They're using our rooms as restrooms and dressing rooms, and makeup rooms. And I just remember thinking, oh, great, thanks. And I just put them to one side in a drawer, and then that was the last of it, and then eventually disappeared. But it's sad. Going back to the Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, the office I worked in was a tiny little room where the three of us, there wasn't room for 3 desks. There was just 2 desks and a small chair in a corner. And that was it, So I always sat in the corner of the chair waiting to do the next task. But it was one of those offices where we never locked the door. Now, this is what I was told by my boss. He had left the office to go and do something. They were filming in Theatre E for The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer. And when he came back to his office, he found that John Cleese was sitting in his chair at his desk with his feet up on his desk using the phone to make a call.
Ooh.
Yes. Now, unfortunately, my late boss, Ron Broughton, was not a man to mince words. It was very clear that he was not happy, and Cleese beat a hasty retreat while the walls were being painted blue with foul language.
Wow.
About what he should do and what he shouldn't do.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been in his office.
But that was that film, and there was another occasion during filming of that. John Cleese, being quite a tall character, the projection room in Theatre E was one of those Friday afternoon jobs where, when they were building it, somebody got the measurements wrong and started building the door frame on the wrong point. So it was actually 6 inches lower than what it should have been, because there were steps going up, and it should have been at the top of the steps. And unfortunately, John Cleese opened the door to go into the projection room where Arthur Lowe was operating the projector, and promptly cracked his head on the top of the door frame. That might have been sort of just rewards in my boss's mind.
Yeah,
John Cleese taking the liberty to use his phone.
Wow.
But that was the the earlier film, the very first one there. But going back to Clockwork Orange, as I say, we've received this memo, but it gave no clue as to what the film was about, who was the stars, who was the director, or anything. So we had no real proper information. But of course, the people started arriving, and then that's when they started building the sets. So the area where Alex goes to visit his parents, or where he's living with his parents, which I believe they called was Municipal Flat Block 18A, Linear North.
Where I lived was with my dad and mum in Municipal Flat Block 18A, Linear North.
It's quite a mouthful to say, isn't it? Yeah. The building they used for that scene was one of the towers in the university. We have 4 towers in the university. They're all named either Tower A, Tower B, Tower C, and they chose to use Tower D. So when we see McDowell sort of stroll in with his into the what appears to be utter carnage and sort of disrepair, a broken lift door, litter everywhere. He just has a look around, and then as he starts to stroll up the stairs, he picks up a bra that's been discarded, and that was Tower D's main entrance lobby area.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
That's where we've got the elevator door hanging off, and he kind of pulls the door.
That's right.
I presume that got fixed later or replaced.
Yeah, that was
back together.
I think what they did was they put in a false door and frame there, just so it looked like it was as if it was actually hanging off. And they probably operated the lift on a key lift to turn it off, but left the doors open on the actual lift itself, so that you still had the door and the light coming through from there. But yeah, that's what they did. Funny enough, a lot of people over the years have asked me and said about the artwork that's seen there, and I said no, that wasn't part of the university's property. That was actually put there for the sake of the film. And I had a rumor that actually Kubrick's wife may have actually sort of put that piece of artwork together. I might be wrong.
You could be right. I haven't heard that, but she was certainly an artist, and an artist who worked on a big canvas. She could have quite possibly done that. I know that I spoke to Michael Tarn, who played one of the Droogs. He played Pete, the 4th Droog, you might say, and he said that he remembers scrolling the graffiti on that mural. There's various. I think it's done in white chalk. It's very easy to read. And Stanley let some of the Droogs actually do the graffiti on there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Another location they used, as I say, so we know that Theatre E was based in the lecture centre, or central lecture block, it used to be called many years ago. We got. Excuse me a moment.
There's the famous scene, isn't there, coming from the big building outside, walking into the check-in area. Is that the John Crank building, I think? Yeah.
For those people that are in the know and recognise the campus, it seems to go. Can I use this word? Arse about face. Wrong way round. Basically, he's seen being escorted from the prison to the Ludovico Institute, but those that work at Brunel recognise that where he's being marched from is actually the lecture centre, which is where he actually is being, being treated in Theatre E. So it's like he's being marched away, but he's actually back in there, having the lid locks set up and being sort of treated with the aversion therapy.
The next morning, I was taken to the Ludovico Medical Facility outside the town centre, and I felt a malanky bit sad having to say goodbye to the old starger, as you always will when you leave a place you've got used to.
Right, hold the prisoner! Good morning, sir. I'm Chief Officer Barnes. I've got 655321 on a transfer from Parkmore to the Ludovico Centre, sir.
Good morning. Yes, we've been expecting you. I'm Dr. Alcott.
Dr. Alcott. Very good, sir. Are you prepared to accept the prisoner, sir?
Yes, of course.
And I wondered if you'd mind signing these transfer documents, sir. There, sir.
You are right. The building that he marches to is no longer there, sadly. It's been knocked down, ready for redevelopment, that part. But it used to be called the John Crank building. And that was like a tower block and a low 2-story rise side attachment to it. But as you go in through the doors, you would turn right into like a lobby area. And that was where McDowell is actually sort of marched through, and Officer, what was it? Not Ralph Bates.
Michael Bates. Yeah.
Michael Bates does his little bit and marches him in, stomps to attention.
Prisoner escort, move forward. Halt! Excuse me, sir.
Is it the officer that is to take charge of the prisoner, sir?
If I may offer a word of advice, Doc, you'll have to watch this one. A right brutal bastard he has been, and will be again, in spite of all his sucking up to the prison chaplain and reading the Bible.
Oh, I think we can manage things. Charlie, will you show the young man to his room now?
Right, sir. You come this way, please.
And presents them to the authority. That was probably one of the easiest sets for them to dress, because it was a big open space with just a couple of large, easy, comfy chairs put in there for people to sit and wait to be picked up and meet other people. But all they did was they just put in sort of like a reception desk, and then some what I call the typical sort of hospital signage behind them. Probably the cheap plastic stuff that's easy to produce.
That slides in and out, the little panels. Yeah.
That's it. And that was that's all they needed to do for that location.
I bet it was only you guys who worked at the university who realised he was being marched from where he'd already come, where he was about to be. Everyone else, the movie magic worked for everyone else, didn't it? But you guys would have thought, you'd have gone, what? That's not right.
Exactly. To me, every time I see that scene, it always feels disjointed. Hang on a moment. But as you say, the marvels of movie magic to create the illusion that you want the public to see is fine, unless the public knows that area and think, oh, hang on a moment, they were going this direction and now they're going that direction. When Alex is first admitted to the Ludovico Institute, we see him in a bedroom scene where I think it's Dr. Branson that comes in to visit him.
Yeah, the female doctor. Is it Dr. Branham?
Yeah. Branham, that's it, Dr. Branham. Dr. Branham visits him.
And the nurse with the hypodermic needle.
That's right, Nurse Hypo, I think some people called her.
Morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Alex. My name is Dr. Branham. I'm Dr. Brodsky's assistant.
Good morning, Mrs. Lovely day, isn't it?
Yes, indeed it is. May I take that? How are you feeling this morning?
Fine.
Good. Now, in a few minutes, you'll meet Dr. Brodsky and we'll begin your treatment. You're a very lucky boy to have been chosen.
I realise that, Mrs., and I'm very grateful to all concerned.
We're going to be friends then, aren't we, Alex?
I hope so, Mrs. What's the hypo for, then? Gonna send me to sleep?
Oh, no, nothing of the sort.
Vitamins, will it be, then?
Something like that. You're a little undernourished, so after each meal, we're going to give you a shot. Roll over on your right side, please. Loosen your pajama pants and pull them halfway down.
That was filmed in one of the halls of residences at Brunel. And what they used, this is when he's given the experimental serum 114.
What exactly is the treatment here going to be, then?
Oh, it's quite simple, really. We're just going to show you some films.
You mean like going to the pictures?
Something like that.
Well, that's good. I like to biddy the old films now and again.
So that was that scene for the bedroom scene was shot in Chepstow Hall in H block, and it was some of the rooms on the third floor. I'm not sure which ones, so I've not been able to find my notes for that. But they used, as I say, about 4 or 5 rooms on that third floor for different things. The sort of male dressing, makeup and things like that. So that was, as I say, Alex's bedroom scene. That was Chepstow Hall, H block. This is what they used.
I believe it was room H36, in fact. I don't know where I've picked that note up. H36.
I think you might be right. That seems to ring a bell. In fact, hang on a moment. Ah, right, yeah. On the reverse side of that, yeah. Okay, so actual locations. Right. Okay, so H33 was used for male wardrobe.
Yeah.
H34 was used for female wardrobe. H35 was used to store the equipment or to operate the equipment from there.
Yeah.
H36 was used for Alex's bedroom scenes. And H37 was used for makeup.
Wow. Well, yeah, that all figures.
Yeah, that's it. And the notes I've got from the daily call sheets reports that filming took place in that location on the 9th, 14th and 16th of September.
Ah, right. Yeah.
So that's what I remember. These sort of scribbled notes. I really do need to actually sort of start putting these typed up properly, rather than scribble that I'd made years ago. But yeah, so that was that. So for Theatre E, they decided that we used to use a whiteboard to project films onto, which is probably not the best of projection materials. So they actually built a proper purpose-built cine screen in front of the whiteboard so they were able to project properly. They obviously had to put something down on the floor and just raise the floor up a little bit, but also provide means of securing the chair that McDowell's going to be sitting in. The last thing you want is something like that sort of toppling over if they move it around too much. So it was obviously anchored down to a proper base that sat on the floor inside the theatre. And that's when they started building and checking things out. And as far as I know from my memories, they came in and started dressing of the sets started taking place between the 13th and the 15th of September. And that's the information I've got. And then obviously filming started at different days in different locations during that period of time they were at Brunel. But obviously my point of involvement came when they came to use the theatre for the Ludovico scenes and that for the aversion therapy. Once they set it up, got it dressed and got the various lights in, basically they then needed somebody to operate the house lights, turn them on and off when they didn't need to do that, and also to operate the cine projector. And being the new kid on the block, the office junior, that's where I was given the task to say, right, okay, you can sit in the projection room. We'll rig up a pair of headphones and put a microphone outside in the theatre so you can hear what's going on. You've got access to the intercom system, so if you need anything, you can call us. If you need a coffee or need a comfort break, then just buzz us and one of us will come up and relieve you, so you can go and get a coffee or a bite to eat or whatever. And that's what happened.
You were operating the projector that is coming over the back of Malcolm McDowell. You're operating
That's right,
projector.
yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But the thing is, what McDowell sees in the film is not what we were projecting.
Of course,
they needed a shaft of light that indicated it was a projector being operated, but they obviously at some stage post-production then filmed a different scene with the scenes we see on the screen, what he sees.
Can you remember what you projected? It was probably just some random film.
It was a random film, so random I can't remember. It was a black and white film. It was just something we had as a stock film just for checking and testing things.
Yeah.
So it didn't run for very long, but it wasn't really what was wanted. The problem was the moment you start projecting a film, obviously you're cutting down the light output, and Kubrick wanted the projection to be as bright as possible. So we ended up projecting, we ended up operating the cine projector without any film going through the film gate. So it was just a pure light source going through the lens, being projected out onto the screen down at the front. And that's what we used. We were able to increase the light output because we had the transformer equipment inside the projection room. Kubrick kept saying, can we have more power? Can we make it brighter and brighter and brighter? And of course, there's a limit to what we could do. And once we've reached the maximum output on that projector, there was nothing we could do. He would have to work around that. At one stage, they did try something. They lugged a great big studio light into the projection room and set it up and tried that to see what it was like, but that never really worked. And so that was all sort of taken out. I'm not sure how many watts that was sort of pumping out. Maybe 5,000 watts, might have even been 10,000 watts. I don't know. But I do remember it was a hell of a size. It's certainly sort of like, about sort of 2 foot across. It's quite a big thing.
So this was in the working week. It wasn't at the weekend.
They did filming at weekends, but primarily they didn't involve us at the weekends. So they would have also used other buildings which weren't being used. That could have been things such as the scenes where McDowell is sort of going to his parents' house for the first time. or where he was being marched across from prison to the Ludovico Institute reception area. And as I say, that was the sort of time, because again, I don't remember seeing those scenes being done. They seem to be in our theatre for the most of the time.
I believe they shot for 3 or 4 days in the theatre. Were you in the projection box for 3 or 4 days then?
I was in there most of the time. There would have been the odd occasion when, I've gone out for a bite to eat, or I've nipped out for the toilet or something like that. But the majority of the time I was in there. And again, I was at the age of 16. The only thing I knew about Kubrick was the film the last film he produced, which was 2001's and that. And although I was interested in science fiction, I knew nothing else about him. And at 16, sitting in that small box for several hours at a time, in fact, longer than that, because most of the filming started about sort of 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning and would often go on till 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, obviously with various breaks for film crews and that. But it got a bit tedious at times. And, my interest would disappear.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, especially if you haven't got... The only kind of exciting job on a film set is probably the director and the actors. Everyone else is mainly hanging around, aren't they? Most. That's right.
Film crews all hang around till somebody says jump, and then everything happens. Yeah, and then obviously once they've got everything set up, it's all quiet on the set again. Everybody goes sneaks off quietly somewhere in the corner, and then, like you say, the actors and the directors start doing their bit with the camera person. But I do remember they did set up quite a few cameras. I think, in fact, at one stage they were doing a 3-camera shoot on McDowell when he was. I believe it was 4.
I believe when they put the lid locks on, it was 4 cameras. Yeah. I've seen Yeah, I've seen one of the production reports that was talking about that. It was kind of talking about the damage to his eye, and it said it was a 4-camera shoot. Yeah, so 4 cameras to cover that, because they knew they could only get them on for maybe a few minutes. And
that's right.
They wanted all the angles. So
Well, the doctor that attends to Malcolm while he's in the chair, I think everybody refers to him as Dr. Lidlocks. That's not his real name, obviously. But he actually is a trained doctor, and that was the one proviso that they had to have a doctor, proper ophthalmic doctor there, to treat his eyes to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And that's that guy. I didn't get a chance to speak to him, but he just sat there all the time, just keep putting in more drops and more drops. And I do remember, on one occasion when I was going for a break, and of course McDowell was strapped into the chair for quite a few hours at a time, and I just remember looking at him and just thinking that, God, how can you sit there in a straitjacket in a chair with your eyelids locked open? I couldn't think of anything more horrifying.
No.
Than that.
The ass thing. I couldn't have my eyes open. He did well. I think the doctor was from Moorfields. Is that a hospital you're familiar with, Moorfields?
I know of it, but I've never been there. But yeah, funny enough, I have had eye surgery, but for that option, I decided to be given general anaesthetic for it.
Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah, but going back to about the damage to his eye, actually, on that one occasion, I was walking down the steps. It was during a break in filming, and my eyes just happened to sort of catch the eye of one of the film crew. I don't know what he was, camera grip, lighting, or whatever. And he just looked at me and he just sort of whispered. He said, "He's going to ruin his eyes, that you." And I thought, "What?" He said, "He's going to ruin his eyes doing this." And that was it. And of course, then, like you say, he did suffer some eye damage, and that one of the lid locks, I believe, sort of slipped and scratched his cornea. And then there was a break in filming. They had to send him home for the rest of the day to try and recover. But yeah, that's what I remember one of the film crew saying to me. But I also remember another occasion when I was going to I was actually going to the shop. It was like during a lunch break, or my lunch break anyway. And I've got downstairs to the ground floor of our building and that. And there's one of the film crew there. I'd recognised him, having seen him up in the main area before in the theatre. And I said to him, "Oh, what are you doing down here? I said, you skiving for a cigarette or something? He said, oh no. He said, I've been positioned down here. He said, if any woman walks in here wearing high heels, I have instructions to ask them to remove the high heels so the clip-clop doesn't echo around the building on the stone flooring in the entrance. And I just looked at her. I said, you what? He said, yeah. He said, he's paranoid that stray sounds are going to come up stairwells and be picked up during the recording.
They might well have done.
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
Echoey places. Yeah, it's amazing how much things are behind the scenes, isn't it? Just to get a film made, that thousands of moving parts that you don't even consider, but just simple things like that. I mean, someone on guard for high heels.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't imagine what the response was from the first woman that walked in there wearing high heels when they were asked to remove them. But I wasn't around for that. But yeah, no, it's the sort of things you see that goes on in filmmaking, and it's really strange at times.
Did you go to the canteen? Were you in a shared canteen with the crew? Did you bump into any of the casting crew? No.
No, I use the university's canteen facilities, and I'm sure that the film crew had their own sort of chuck wagon, so to say, that provided food for them and that. Again, there were times when, for me, it was a cup of coffee was brought up and maybe a sandwich, and I sometimes sat and ate it in the projection room. I mean, as I say, spending quite a few hours in that small projection room and it did get a bit tedious at times because, like you say, there's a lot of hanging around while they get things set up, and obviously setting up lights, changing camera positions, and then eventually they would go for a rehearsal and a rehearsal and a rehearsal and a rehearsal, and then as I say, Kubrick was very sort of particular, was always looking for the ultimate perfection, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it was scene after scene or take after take. And I do remember there was one occasion when I was going, again, having a mini break, getting out of the projection room for a while. I'd nipped out for a coffee. Even with the theatre doors closed, I could hear McDowell's voice could be heard echoing around the building. Stop it, please, I beg you, please. It's a sin, it's a sin, it's a sin. And this was rehearsed over and over and over again. And I guess at some stage they did take after take after take. But I just remember that walking down those stairs and just hearing this voice getting fainter and fainter because he was actually shouting it out, his lines, and very, very low. And like you say, old buildings tend to be very echoey. They're very lively sort of sound arrangements and that. But yeah, that was one of the things I remember.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that scene is probably one of the most kind of recognizable scenes from Kubrick's whole filmography. That the lid lock scene. You were there. You witnessed that. Wow.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. As I say,
amazing.
It's just one of those things. You just, as I say, at the age of 16, I didn't really appreciate it properly. That was the problem.
Do you remember if Kubrick was directly giving you instructions, or did he have a first AD who was communicating?
No, I think it was probably the first AD or maybe the second AD. Yeah, never actually got to speak to Kubrick. Walked past him.
Yeah,
but again, at 16, I didn't feel confident enough to say hello, Mr. Kubrick.
Yeah,
that would have been a bit too cheeky.
But you realised he was the director, he was in charge. You could tell he was the main man in the room, kind of thing.
Yeah, I did indeed. Yeah, as I say, what I didn't realise was, was that it wasn't until years later that I'd witnessed the master at work, a perfectionist. And that's what he was. If it took 20 takes or 20 rehearsals to get 1 second or one minute's worth of film in the can, that's what he would do. Yeah. But to me, just sitting there in that box with a pair of headphones on, just watching, through a tiny little slit of a window, projection window, what's going on, after a while, it gets a bit sort of boring. The thing is, I couldn't sort of sit and read because I really had to be on the ball to be able to sort of turn the lights on and off and operate the projector. And that's one of the reasons why I think I got a bit bored at times.
Yeah.
But it's still enjoyable to a point.
Mm.
But it's, as I say, it wasn't, until many years later, and people say, "You worked on that film? Wow."
Yeah.
What about it?
Yeah.
But then, of course, then my interest sort of started to grow about it. Wanted to find out more and more about it. Just wish I had a camera.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you'd had a few behind the scenes shots.
You mentioned in your notes earlier on about some dates when they were filming. Yes, they did come back to do some pickup shots as well in February.
That's why I've got the two different dates. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got the 14th to the 18th of November for the original, the Ludovico screening room stuff. And then mid-February, I think they came back just to do some close-ups on Malcolm's eyes. I think that's all they wanted to do. That's when because he saved it right to the end of the shoot. It was literally one of the last days of the shoot, I believe, with the eyes, just in case anything went wrong, and it did. Yeah. They finished filming with Malcolm. I think that was the very last thing they shot with Malcolm. So they came back just to the close-ups. Yeah,
it was on the daily reports that I'd seen some years ago. I made a note of what it said, and it said that they were pickup shots for Malcolm. I believe Dr. Lidlocks was going to be there, and the chair, and they just needed to get some pickups, and also partly the voice as well. So they needed to get the acoustics right. Funny enough, there was a company, or rather, there was an organisation called See Film Differently, which was sponsored by VW, and they used to do special one-off film shows to recreate scenes that were, or locations that we use for films. Okay. And on the 40th anniversary of Clockwork Orange, they actually came back to Brunel, this company called See Film Differently, and they basically they dressed the theatre. Sorry, not just the theatre. They basically, the first floor foyer was turned over to it as an exhibition area of all Kubrick memorabilia to do with Clockwork Orange. They then screened the film later that evening in Theatre E. They put in a decent cine projector, well, not cine, a video projector in to project it, and they laid on some food and drink, and it was by invitation only. You apply for your ticket and so on, and that was all very well attended, and the amount of publicity material that they had on display in the sort of first floor foyer was fantastic. The one thing I do remember most of all was that if you remember the Maloko bar where you had the ladies where they're leaning like this and how they get their drinks. Yeah. Well, they had replicated 4 of these. Really? I don't think they were the originals, but they were being replicated to sit on top of these giant boxes that were used for displaying photos on the 4 sides. And at some stage, somebody decided that no, perhaps we shouldn't be displaying these 4 ladies on the top of the boxes because of the pose that they're in and the fact that they might be described as being obscene. Yeah. So they were never used. But I don't know what became of them. Again, the sort of thing like, where did they go? They were locked away in a classroom while the exhibition was taking place because it was for one night only. But they spent about a week dressing the first floor foyer for all the publicity material and displays and that photographs and that.
Is there any record of that event? Were there any photographs taken by anybody?
I took some photos. Yeah, I took some photos. There may be something if you do an internet search for See Film Differently, and if you can find that link, you may find that there may be some photos, publicity photos, because they did things like, let's see, An American Werewolf.
Oh yeah, one of my favourites.
They did that, yeah. Well, they went back to one of the locations. I saw the film many, many years ago, so I don't remember what location they used. But they would basically take a film, a well-known film, and go back to a location and arrange to do a screening at that location, along with a lot of publicity material on display for one day and one night only.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right, so that was on the 40th anniversary. So that was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
So at that point, you were back at Brunel for your second stint.
Yeah, I left Brunel in 1980 to move on for, sort of into a more challenging job. And then for the next 14 years, I worked at the local hospital, Hillingdon Hospital, working in the School of Nursing, which is where at that time nurses undertook their nurse training on the wards rather than doing it like they do today. And that job required me to sort of work based at Hillingdon to looking after the learning resources and teaching room facility there, but also it covered the Harefield Hospital and the Mount Vernon Hospital, which was part of the same group. So my job was quite a nice job because no 2 days were ever alike. It was nice. Variety is the spice of life, as they say.
Sure.
And that daily job, as I say, would just change from day to day, here, there, and so on. I really enjoyed that.
Do you remember the first time you saw the film? Did you go to the cinema, or were you not that bothered at the time?
Yeah. The film, when it was released, we had two cinemas in Uxbridge. One was the Odeon and the other one was the Regal. And it was being screened at the Regal. So I told, obviously, a lot of my friends I told about the film being made at Brunel. So when it first came out, about 4 or 5 of us decided we would go to the cinema the first night it was being shown. But so we walked in, but it was quite strange because it felt like half the Brunel campus was there as well. Of looking around and thinking, oh, I know him. Oh, I know her. Oh, yes. Oh, that's Dr. So-and-so. Oh, that's Professor So-and-so. Oh, look, there's some of the students I drink with. Oh, hang on. Yes. And it was just like, it's like half the theatre was filled with people from Brunel.
Wow.
It was quite good.
And that, I believe that was probably January 72. That's when it kind of opened.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I could tell you when on my notes. Right, first screened on the 13th of January 1972. So that's the date. There is one other location, but I've never been able to get any further information about it from notes that I made. And that was they did supposed to have shot scenes in what was called the Engineering Centre at Brunel. Now, that scene that I've sort of looked at, and I think it's the bit where it's the scene where McDowell is actually given a beating by the police officers, and one of them sort of gobs in his face. And that's
yeah.
That was Stephen Burkoff, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. So you think that might have been at Brunel as well?
Yeah. Well, what I've got on that sort of memo, what did it say? But filming was planned to take place in the Engineering Centre, 3rd floor, North Corridor. But then again, they also mentioned about filming in the Mass Annex John Crank building. And then there seems to be another option of filming in Tower D. Now, I think they gave themselves options to film in different locations on maybe 1 day or 2 days, but I've been over to the Engineering Centre. It's now been renamed the Howell Building, or Howell Theatre, and it's changed so much structurally inside. It's difficult for me to identify actual rooms. Rooms have been divided or knocked through, made up, sort of rebuilt again and that. So it's changed totally. The only thing that makes me think that is Brunel is the typical Brunel brickwork that's been painted over.
Painted white, yeah. And I think is it like grey at the bottom and white at the top or something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's being an engineering university, they used a lot of engineering bricks in the building lids. And I wouldn't be surprised underneath those coats of paint is engineering bricks that form part of the room. But when I do my research, I like to try and actually pinpoint actual locations to say, yes, that is the room that was used. But because it's changed so much in that building, it's been knocked about and revamped so many times, there's nothing there that gives me any clue of whereabouts they filmed. And unfortunately, all these years later, there is nobody still working at Brunel that remembers that filming going on, because they've actually given it the title of... Right, I had a note scribbled down somewhere that it was called a psychological testing unit.
Okay.
In that building. And for an engineering building, that's a bit of a strange title to have housed in that building.
As you know, I'm a big Kubrick fan, and Clockwork Orange is my favourite Kubrick film, so I'm loving all this. But we should move on to your current project that you've kind of been working on.
Yes. When I came...
Go on, tell us about that.
Yeah, when I came back to Brunel back in 1994, there was a lot of people I knew from the 70s that were still working at Brunel, and catching up with them over a pint or a bite to eat, and that they would say, "Oh, we had, they've had filming done here for Morse, this film, that film," and we get chatting, and they got more and more interested in saying, "Oh, I didn't know about that, didn't know about this." And I started sort of like saying, well, what else has been filmed here? So this started to become a bit like an itch that you can't stop scratching, wanting to find out more information.
Yeah.
So I would then sort of do a bit of research, and then there was the in-house magazines the university produced on a monthly basis, and those magazines invariably said, we've had John Thor and Kevin Watley here last week filming scenes for Inspector Morse, and then another magazine there'd be another thing about another film, and so on. So I found that sort of information out, and then that started the real challenge. Was what exactly did they film? What episode? When? What locations? And also any other films or TV series that were shot here. So I then sort of realised that, in fact, Inspector Morse has been shot on campus. I think there was about 7. It was used on 7 or 8 occasions for different episodes. And so there's quite a lot of sort of Morse series that have been shot at Brunel over the years. And the interesting thing was that when Morse series finished, the very, very first episode of Lewis, which they decided to see if there was, it could follow on in its own sort of on its own strengths, was originally called Pilot, because it was a pilot episode.
Okay, yeah.
And they called that, they eventually retitled that Reputation. It was later renamed Reputation. But because it was a pilot episode, whenever you looked at anything, they referred to it as Pilot.
Yeah,
first episode, but it's called episode. And the strange thing about that was that I remember watching them filming scenes for that, but not realising what it was about. I didn't realise it was for Lewis. But they've done other things. We've been fortunate enough to have a whole host. We seem to be used as either a police station or as a hospital these days.
Yeah.
The campus. So to give you an idea, we've got, let's see. Oh, we also had the New Avengers with Patrick McNee and Gareth Hunt, was it, I believe?
Yeah, Gareth Hunt and Joanna Lumley, yeah.
Yeah, they were filming at Brunel. I remember watching that, and I did do actually some cine filming of that. I brought my cine camera in and managed to get a few moments of footage of them filming and that was for an episode called Sleeper.
Okay.
And then we had a whole host of other things. There was a series called The Comic Strip Presents.
Comic strip. I love the comic strip.
Yeah, well, if you get to watch Summer School from series 1, that's virtually the whole of Brunel.
Oh, wow. I must look at that. Must look at that again. I've got the box set with every episode.
Yep.
We did about 30 episodes.
Well, that's what was filmed there. Again, I wasn't here to watch that. Unfortunately, there was another series called Fox about a family, an East End London family that were a bit of a gangster family, and that was filmed at Brunel. But I wasn't around to see that. And then we had one of the last things I saw at Brunel before I left was Sweeney.
That classic show.
Yes. Now, that one was called Thou Shalt Not Kill. And about 90% of that episode is filmed at Brunel. And it was filmed during a very, very hot summer. In fact, during a drought. Because when you watch the DVD, you look at the grass and you think, that's not green. That looks like it's dead. And if you look closely at the faces of the actors, you'll notice that, in fact, that despite the makeup lady doing all she could, or he could do, everyone seemed to have little beads of sweat all over their face because the temperatures were very much in the high 80s by then. And we were in the middle of a drought. But yeah, that episode, I remember watching that. That was quite good.
And of course, that was John Thaw again. So when he came back to the moors, he'd already been there for the Sweeney.
That's right. Yeah. But as I say, I carried on researching and that. And over the years, what's happened now is I've built up a listing that is currently around about 95 different films or TV shows or even adverts that have been shot at Brunel. And most cases, certainly from the 1994, when I was back on campus, I was able to watch and make notes of what was filmed, where they were filming, who was there, and so on. If I didn't see it, then invariably I would buy the DVD and I would sort of research it through detail by detail. And that's what I've sort of built up now. The ultimate aim is from this list that I've created, is to produce a booklet of some sort. A lot of people are saying to me you should do it as an internet thing, but I still want something tangible that you can put in your hand and say, here's a book, rather than something that's just a website.
That sounds fascinating. That sounds fascinating. I'd be a customer for that book for sure.
Yeah,
I love those kind of books.
Yeah, hopefully, that will come to fruition. I'm trying to see if I can convince the university to actually sort of finance it for me. As a limited run of books. I don't know how many, but at one stage I thought I had the print room on my side, but just recently they've stopped taking on private work because I would have actually put the money up myself and said, right, what would it cost to do a run of, say, 100 books, and get a figure? And I would put the money up myself. But I'm waiting to see if the university will step in and say, oh, hang on a moment, John, this is something that the university can benefit from as well because of all the research you've put in.
Have you actually? Is the book ready to go? Is it all written?
No. It's what it needs now is some fine tuning. It needs some proofreading. It needs some fact checking,
some screen grabs and pictures and things. Yeah.
I say I've got a lot of photographs ready to go with this. To add in, and some of them, and I've still got some I still haven't finished researching because we've had so many films or TV series being shot on campus. It's the sort of thing where when I do the research and I sort of do the writing up and that, I have to be focused. I have to be in the right mood to do it. It's not something I try and do half-heartedly. So there's quite a few things in there. I mean, there's now talk about another Netflix production coming to Brunel soon. But I'm getting to the stage where I'm thinking I'll have to start excluding things that are going on, simply because otherwise I'm never going to get to a cutoff. I need a cutoff point. Otherwise I'll just keep having to add and then do more research. But part of this summer was my plans were to sort of really focus on this and get it done.
Right.
But there's a whole host of things I've got. There's adverts. We've had adverts done for bread. Adverts for so many different things. Probably the most interesting one I thought was basically the stunt double for when they're doing the adverts for the car hire company, where the guy parachutes into a car. Enterprise Car Hire was the company.
Okay, yeah, I know the company.
And they've got the guy who's basically he did two episodes, two adverts for him. But the first one is actually while he's doing parachuting, he actually makes a phone call to Enterprise Car Hire to say, "I need a car quickly. Can you make sure it's a convertible and leave the roof open?"
Oh yeah,
he drops
that's
into the car.
And the hits just keep on coming. Quite a cool story, huh? Lots more coming, so keep your eyes peeled. No lid locks required. Don't forget to check out our groups on Facebook, the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society, and also the page for Kubrick's Universe. We also have 2 YouTube channels, which you can search, the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society and Kubrick's Universe. So on behalf of Stephen Rigg, I'm your host and humble narrator, Jason Furlong, saying thanks for tuning in. And in the immortal words of Bartles and James, thank you for your support.
It's Kubrick's Universe. We just live in it.
We have taken very thorough precautions in this podcast against broadcasting anything which might only be attributed to human error.
These guys aren't scientists. They're making it up as they go along.
Thank you for listening to the Stanley Kubrick podcast. Come back soon.
It was real nice talking to you. Bye. Over and out.
This show comes to you from the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society.